Hi, welcome to Primary Cinema. My name is Gavin. You may also know me as the world's #1 Mike Mills fan. This is a position that is entirely self-appointed and utterly unpaid, but one I take very, very seriously, as evidenced by my background here today. Real heads know about this one in particular, and this even bigger book, which was too big to fit in the background. I'm just going to hold it on my lap here for reassurance. Today we're going to talk about the Criterion Collection box set. I'll remind you of everything, the films of Mike Mills. If you want to hear what a Mike Mills superfan has to say about this box set, boy, have you found the right video. I will note I previously did a video essay on this very channel about the films of Mike Mills a few years ago. It's quite a personal video for me. The quality isn't probably all that great, but the contents of it is, I think, pretty good, and you might check it out if you want, so I'll link it in the description below. But today, Criterion box set. It includes Beginners, 20th Century Women, and Come On, Come On. Those are the feature films, but there's lots of extra bonuses, short films, documentaries, music videos, commentaries, interviews, that sort of stuff. Beginners, 20th Century Women, Come On, Come On. These kind of form an unofficial trilogy, a sort of autobiographical vein that he's struck in his work, are very personal, very intimate portraits of people very near and dear to Mike Mills. So Beginners is sort of a love letter to his father. It's his father has an interesting story. As a very elderly man near the end of his life, came out as gay. Of course, that revelation has a big, profound, reverberating impact on Mills's understanding of the man. 20th Century Women is sort of focused on his mother, but as well other women in his life, including his sister, who is a big inspiration for Greta Gerwig's character in the film Abby. Come On, Come On is sort of a tribute to his child and sort of the way that having a child impacts your look and outlook on life. So these are three very, very personal and intimate films. Features an awful lot of autobiographical detail, objects and clothing that were previously belonging to the people involved. It has a very strong sense of verisimilitude, which is very agonizingly worked over and over at the script level, as Mills sort of gets into in the interviews here. So they are fascinating movies for me. And the films make a very interesting collection because watching one film can sort of color and deepen your understanding of the other films. For example, in 20th Century Women, Annette Bening's character Dorothea at one point monologues about her eventual death many years into the future. She talks about lying in a hospital bed with silver dolphin balloons hanging above her head. And then in Come On, Come On, Joaquin Phoenix's character Johnny, who is sort of a Mike Mills stand-in, his mother dies in a hospital bed with dolphin balloons hanging above her head. It's not pointed out. It's not even pointed out in the commentary track in this collection, but it's just a subtle detail which I found very moving when I noticed it. And there's lots and lots of that throughout this trilogy, including in that same scene in Come On, Come On, there's a photo of a rabbit hanging on a wall, which is reminiscent of wood carvings that Mike Mills' mom made after seeing Watership Down. I can actually show you. This is one of the rabbits his mother carved after watching Watership Down. It is featured in 20th Century Women. This is the A24 20th Century Women zine. I also have that in my collection, and there's lots and lots of these little, I wouldn't quite call them Easter eggs, they're a bit more emotive than that, but they're very, very fun and meaningful, and can, to me, they speak to the authenticity and the truth in these films. And as well, I just find them greatly brave on Mills's behalf to sort of share these intimate moments. I find just the thought of that to be very moving and interesting as an art piece. And even though I say, obviously, that these films make are perfect, ripe choice for a box set, I was a little bit surprised at the Criterion announcement when this was announced. Of course, I was quite pleased and felt extremely vindicated as Mike Mills' #1 fan. But it did surprise me because, to me, Mills sort of occupied a bit of a no man's land in the Criterion mission. It sort of wasn't one of these commercial plays like K-pop Demon Hunters or WALL-E that I felt, this is sort of a moneymaker that will fund more obscure picks. And it wasn't really an obscure pick either, These are three very recent films, which, to my knowledge, have all pretty healthy lives on physical media and in digital streaming services and that sort of thing. But I suppose what Criterion can offer in a situation like this is curation, right? So just having these films together in a box set, I do think is a great benefit. And then also the surrounding ephemera and supplements that Criterion can offer, including the bonus features and the booklet. I was very intrigued to see what those would be like. So now to discuss the supplemental features, there are 3 commentary tracks, 1 for each film. They were recorded for the original physical release. As far as I can tell, they're not sort of retrospective commissioned by Criterion now. So they're still very kind of contemporary with the film, and you can get a lot of good recent details from listening to those. But there's also then the bonus features, such as a music video he made for the band Air. Just 1 music video, although he made 3 or 4 for them in sort of a series. I would have liked to have seen more of those being included, but we got 1 in this case, a short documentary, a skateboarding documentary called Deformer, which is quite interesting, from I think 1996. Eating, Sleeping, Waiting and Playing. This is a hour-long documentary tour doc for the band Air as part of his collaboration with them that sort of focuses on the boredom and minutiae of touring life. It's sort of the unglamorous ordeal of touring around and press junkets and waiting in venues and sitting around in green rooms and that kind of thing, which is interesting and offbeat angle for a tour documentary, obviously. And his most recent work here is the Talking Heads music video for the Psycho Killer 50th anniversary he did with Saoirse Ronan. That's included here, and that's on the 20th Century Women Blu-ray. There's a major Talking Heads storyline through 20th Century Women. It's sort of a nice acknowledgement there to have that. It also includes his short film from the year 2000, The Architecture of Reassurance. This is a film I previously watched on Mills's Vimeo page, so nice to have a physical release. That is a good sort of Rosetta Stone for Mills's filmography, in the sense that it's a blend of docudrama similar to Come On, Come On. It has a narrative fiction storyline that's interspersed with real conversations, real documentary footage. It also has a good basis for understanding his appreciation and curation of objects, which is something I talk about in my video essay, so I won't get into great detail here, but just to note it. There was also A Mind Forever Voyaging Through Strange Seas of Thought Alone. This is a short film similar to Come On, Come On, again, in that it's interviewing children in a talking head style and taking their answers very seriously. These aren't sort of, kids say the darndest things. It is very empathetic and serious, sort of questioning kids about what do they imagine the future will be like in a sort of time capsule-y sort of way. So of course, this being an SF MoMA commission, it does feel sort of like a museum piece. It's the type of thing you would kind of expect you would sit down and watch in a museum setting rather than like a feature film, or not a feature film, but a short film. The standout in terms of shorts for me on this box set was I'm Easy to Find, the Mike Mills and the National collaboration. The short film is about half hour long and uses tracks from one of the National's albums as the soundtrack, and it charts a woman's life from beginning to end, quite literally from birth to death, and it's played by Alicia Vikander, who is playing this girl and then woman all the way through her life. I really loved it. I thought it was such an amazing, ambitious thing to do, but then it also felt so quiet and intimate and small at the same time. And the interaction of the images along with the captions underneath was reminiscent of Mills's graphic design work, and I really enjoyed that. It's included on the Come On, Come On Blu-ray. The Dresner brothers, I believe they are, did the soundtrack for Come On, Come On. It's also shot in black and white, so it's sort of a interesting in the lead up to Come On, Come On. Maybe there was a bit of practicing going on there, and of course it sparked a new collaboration. So that's another interesting piece in that it's fun to watch, but it also kind of tells you a little bit more about Come On, Come On and the development process there. And if we're going to talk about sort of the development and creative process for Mills, then the real gem here is the hour-long conversation between Mike and documentary filmmaker Kirsten Johnson, which is really stunning and amazing, and it goes through his whole career, basically, from the very early pre-production stages all the way through to location scouting, the casting and everything else. This is, again, just something I really found so enjoyable as someone who is a major Mike Mills fan. This is such a great insight. Similar to sort of the 20th Century Women screenplay, includes notes and pieces from the development process, but this was like that tenfold. It was really, really amazing. And at one point, Johnson makes this point that she finds a thread in Mills's work, this sort of curation or assemblage of different objects, images, captions together, and sort of putting one thing next to another and making a third thing, that synthesis, that kind of classic Eisensteinian sort of way, you could say. And I found that to be so true. You know, Mills, for me, I always think about his graphic design work when thinking about his filmmaking. I often sort of compare it to the graphic design idea of collage and the editing idea, film editing idea of montage, and the way of assembling and curating these things and putting them side by side. I feel that when watching his films, especially something like 20th Century Women, and all the archival footage and all the photography and all the captions and quotes that go on in his work, putting these side by side, you know, it expands the film in such a joyous way, I find. Like the Jimmy Carter speech in 20th Century Women, for example, you know, these historical bits and pieces that he puts together make it feel more than just a film, but also like a product of history and a product of a time. And I found that very an astute observation by Johnson. You can definitely see that thread run through his work, not just in the completed works, but then also in his creative process. So like his writing process literally starts with writing things on scraps of paper. And one thing I always kind of say about Mills's films is they feel like scrapbooks, because they have that element of sticking things and memories and notable bits and pieces and things that maybe would otherwise be forgotten or consigned to rubbish of history. This, he calls, at one point, he uses the phrase historical debris, which is so right and so true of like something like Jimmy Carter's speech. Carter got blown away in that 1979 election, and the Reagan years came on fierce and strong, but taking that one moment in his presidency and amplifying it and putting it in a film and showing these characters' reactions to it, and especially Dorothea's reaction to it, is classic Mills stuff, right? And it's through that kind of historical consciousness, graffiti that goes on in Beginners as well. It goes on through his design work and any sort of his art, that he has this impulse to pick up and remember bits of history that maybe other people would forget otherwise. So just a great conversation between Mills and Johnson that had me thinking about lots of different things and unveiled a lot of interesting insight into his workflow and his process. As an artist, I really, really enjoyed it. If this box set was just that hour-long interview, I'd still would have bought it. So that was great. And as usual, this box set, Criterion box set, comes with a little booklet that Criterion always includes with an essay. This one has both an essay and an interview with Mills. The essay is written by Joachim Trier, a filmmaker I really, really like. I would say the essay he wrote for this, fine. You know, it's not a standout for me. I will note this booklet is very much in the style of Mike Mills, this cover, but the essay didn't really do much for me. I didn't think it was all that inspirational or additive or whatever. The interview was a little bit more so. Although I was a bit disappointed with the interview also, the title of the interview was A Radical Democracy of Images. Kim Hendrickson talks with Mike Mills about his work outside of feature filmmaking. And that got me really excited as a fan interested in Mills as a filmmaker, but also as a graphic designer, and how his previous work in lots of different fields of art influences his work on film. I got really excited to see his work outside of feature filmmaking in the title, but unfortunately, the emphasis is on feature in that sentence, right? So he talks about music videos, shorts, not so much about ads, which I suppose is understandable in a Criterion box set. Maybe you wouldn't talk about the work you do for ads in great detail, but he does mention in the Johnson interview and a little bit here that, you know, they're a place for him to practice and to improve his craft in some ways. I maybe would have, you know, in the interest of making this a career retrospective, maybe hearing a little bit about like how he used different ad campaigns and used them in a way that he could benefit from them creatively, you know. But that's just me. There is some interesting stuff here. There's a mention to Does Your Soul Have a Cold, which is a film I have a history with. It's a feature-length documentary that is extremely difficult to track down. I don't think it ever got a physical release. It's not really available on any streamer. It's not available on even some shady sites that I looked at to try and find a copy. I had to go through a whole rigmarole with an US Amazon account and a gift card and all sorts of, I presume, monetary fraud of some form or other to watch a very shitty kind of, I think 360p or 480p copy streaming on Amazon. When this Criterion release was announced, I kind of hoped maybe Criterion could have worked a bit of magic and figured out whatever rights issue is there to get this a proper release in sort of the similar style to Architecture of Reassurance. Unfortunately, that's not the case. It's not included in this box set. Having seen it, although, as I said, a quite poor quality stream, I can't say it's, you know, a sort of essential to understanding Mills or anything like that. It's an interesting film. It's about people in Japan who are on antidepressants, which were kind of recently introduced to Japan, and they have a different outlook to antidepressants there. Does your soul have a code was a advertising slogan for the introduction of antidepressants to the Japanese market. So it's interesting, and it's, you know, Mills does a lot of work in Japan, which again isn't kind of touched on here, but maybe I would like to have heard a little bit about him spending a lot of time in the 90s in Japan in particular. But, you know, what can you do? Unfortunately, it wasn't included in the box set, and yeah, I don't know if that film is ever the rights are ever going to be untangled, unfortunately. Alongside that film, in terms of notable omissions, I would include Paper Boys, which is, I believe, a 2001 45-minute documentary about newspaper delivery boys in suburban America. This is a film which presence I really felt missing in this box set. It would have been a great accompaniment to something like Come On, Come On, because it's Mills interviewing children in a similar style to how he does so in Come On, Come On. It's questions about the future, and there's again, similar stuff with inanimate objects, which I do mention in my video essay. I cite that as well. But the only footage of that film I've seen is an 8-minute clip that is again on Mike Mills's Vimeo page. So I was hoping that that would have gotten a full release here. It didn't. And more so than Does Your Soul Have a Code, I think it would be a very insightful addition in terms of understanding Mills as an artist and his development as an artist. So that is probably the most disappointing omission I would flag here. The box set also doesn't include Thumbsucker. Thumbsucker is his feature film debut. It's sort of a notable but understandable exclusion in that Thumbsucker sort of sticks out like a sore thumb in his filmography, excuse the pun. It's not autobiographical in the way that these three films are. It's a young adult novel adaptation. It's very 2000s indie Sundance core sort of style, and to me, it feels more like Mills imitating that kind of style rather than being a true expression of himself. I don't know how he feels about that. As I said, it's not included in the box set, so there isn't sort of deep questioning about it here. But I will just note that if anyone who does pick up this box set and burns through it, there is another film there waiting for you to check out as well, Thumbsucker. I think in terms of, I'm not sure what the physical media release status of that film is like, but I have it on digital. It is available in places like that. So if you want to check out Thumbsucker, you certainly can. Again, just to talk about the booklet a little bit, I did note I like the cover, but the interior wasn't really what I was hoping for. I thought this was a big missed opportunity. Mills, you know, as I mentioned with the A24 zine there and the films behind me, he has such a history of making books and booklets in service of his bigger projects that I thought the Criterion booklet in this instance really was a missed opportunity not to explore that in some kind of way and to include more of his photography or graphic design work. When talking about kind of photography and graphic design, should be noted there's this image on the interior of the box set, Let's Be Human Beings. This is an image which was featured on the cover of a old DVD box set from around 2000s or so, which was 4 short films by Mills. So it's sort of maybe an Easter egg in that kind of way. But like, this is an interesting image to include in two sort of ways, right? So it has the suburban feel of Architecture of Reassurance, and it also has this sort of graffiti style that we see in Beginners as well. But it's a little bit orphaned here on its own in the box set, right? So here we have, on the other side, it's just sort of screen caps from the monitor of during production on Come On, Come On. I would have liked to have seen just a bit more of his photography and his graphic design work included, and I think the booklet would have been the place to do that. So I'm thinking of, in particular, Colette Paris, This Is What They Bought, is a photo series he did, documenting items belonging to his nieces. I think they were 9 and 11 years old, 9 or 10 years old. Of course, it speaks to a lot of things, his use and curation of inanimate objects. It speaks to the Abby or Greta Gerwig character's photo project in 20th Century Women. And it speaks to his understanding of children and his communications with children that is present in Come On, Come On. So I would have liked that to have been mentioned at one point. And also in his graphic design work, there's this idea of self-portraiture, which again is mentioned by Abby, but also is done through inanimate objects. So there's one instance where he made a booklet that he referred to as a self-portrait through listing all the books on spirituality he owned. And there was also a self-portrait poster which listed the Best Picture winner, most popular song, and #1 TV show in every year of his life. And so these things, I feel if they were mentioned either in a critical essay within this booklet or just featured as images in the booklet, they could have been more illuminating for the potential box set buyer, that they could see that his work in film is reverberated throughout his entire work as an artist. I think that would have been a beneficial inclusion, and I'm a bit disappointed with the booklet design in this sense. I would just talk a little bit more about the commentaries, because I love commentary tracks. As I said, these are filmed around the times of the original physical media releases, so they're all recent. They're interesting in that for 3 films, they cover a lot of the same ground. If he talks about Gordon Willis, he talks about Fellini, he talks about Godard. You know, you could see this as being talking about the same stuff, and boy, you get some new material. But for me, I think it's real maturity as an artist that he knows who his influences are, and he's comfortable talking about them. In the beginner's commentary track, he talks about This American Life, the NPR radio show, being an influence. And then by Come On, Come On, you know, which was made so many years later, it's about a radio documentarian, and it features Molly Webster as an actress who isn't on This American Life but does work for Radiolab, a very similar show. In a way, you can see these interests bubbling around, and one thing that gets mentioned in passing 2 projects later becomes like a major theme and story thread throughout. So that's rewarding again for someone who's interested in exploring his films. He sort of wears his influences on his sleeve, and he is comfortable talking about them, and he's comfortable revisiting them at different points and elaborating on them more and more. So if someone is interested in that kind of stuff, for me, I am, so I was delighted. And I'll finish up now, but if you're sticking around this long in the video, I imagine you do have some interest in Mills. I'm not sure how many people are sticking around just on behalf of my raw charisma, but if you are still somehow on the fence about checking out Mills's films, and if at all you are thinking that this sort of autobiographical trilogy is a little bit self-indulgent, if you're thinking it might be a bit boring, if you're dismissing it on that ground, I do think something that gets touched on in the Kirsten Johnson interview is Tilda Swinton's interaction with Mike Mills after they worked together on Thumbsucker. She asked Mike what he was going to work on next, and he sort of said, I'm not too sure. I'm thinking about developing this project about my dad, but I don't know if it's too sort of selfish or too self-involved. And she sort of cut him off and said, or generous. And I thought that really spoke to Tilda as a person and a collaborator and an artist, but also I found that was such a true word to describe Mills's films. I do find them to be generous. I do find them to be very kind and an act of sharing what is very personal material, but doing so in such a beautiful way. And I've benefited greatly from his films. I really, really do love them. I've watched them countless times. So I highly recommend, if you're on the fence at all, check them out. I would start with 20th Century Women. That's my favorite film. It's #1 on my Letterboxd. Amazing film, amazing cast, amazing soundtrack, amazing look. But any of those 3 films here in this trilogy, I think are great stuff, and you're welcome to check them out as you please. I certainly can't control what you do. But that's it. I'll finish up. Goodbye. Good luck. That's my video, and I'm sticking to it.